Edgar Allan Poe was born in Boston, Massachusetts on January 19th, 1809.
By the time Poe was 3 years old, his father had abandoned his family, leaving Poe, his brother, his sister, and his mother, Elizabeth, by themselves. Shortly after Poe's father left, his mother died of tuberculosis. Poe watched his mother die at her deathbed. This event scarred Edgar for the rest of his life.
At this point, Poe was a foster child. He was separated from his siblings and adopted by John and Frances Allan. Poe and Frances seemed to form a strong bond rather quickly, but this statement did not hold true to John.
Generally, Poe and John did not get along very well. When Poe went to the University of Virginia in 1826, John did not send Poe with enough money to cover his costs. This left Poe struggling for money. Poe tried to make enough money to cover these costs by gambling, and to say the least, he failed miserably, managing to put himself in debt.
After his experience at college, he returned home only to find news that was worse than his poker skills. His fiancée had become engaged to another man. After these events took place, Poe left the Allens to go join the army.
After Poe leaves the Allens, he gets accepted into West Point. It seems things are finally starting to look up for Poe when suddenly things take a turn for the worse. Poe's foster mother, Frances, dies of tuberculosis on February 28, 1829. And if that wasn't bad enough, he was discharged from the Army in 1829 and expelled from West Point in 1831.
After being expelled from West Point, Poe sees no reason to go back to the Allens because Frances is dead. So instead, he goes to Baltimore to live with his Aunt Maria Clem and cousin Virginia Clem. Poe has a good life while he is living with the Clems. He has a really good relationship with both Maria and Virginia. On March 27, 1834, John Allan dies. He leaves nothing in his will to Edgar.
In 1835, Poe moves to Richmond, Virginia to join the Messenger editorial staff. He later brings Virginia and her mother to live in Virginia as well. In 1836, Poe decides he wants to marry his 13-year-old cousin, Virginia Clem. And just in case you were wondering, no, they did not meet in Martin County.
Poe and Virginia had a great relationship and loved each other very much. Poe was a good husband and Virginia was a good wife. In 1837, Poe resigns from the Messengers and he and Virginia move to New York. Nothing too eventful happens while they live in New York. In 1838, Poe and Virginia move to Philadelphia, and just 1 year later, in 1839, Poe becomes assistant editor at Button's Gentleman's Magazine. But in 1840, he gets in a fight with the editor at Button's and resigns. In 1841, he becomes the editor of Graham's Magazine.
In 1842, Poe began to write most of the poems and short stories that we know and love today. The Pit and the Pendulum, The Mask of the Red Death, and The Mystery of Marie Reget were all wrote in 1842. In 1843, Poe wrote The Telltale Heart, The Gold Bug, and The Black Cat. In 1844, Poe moved back to New York City. While he was in New York City, he published The Raven in the New York Evening Mirror. In 1846, Poe and Virginia moved to Fordham, New York. While in Fordham, he writes The Cask of Amontillado. In 1847, on January 30th, what is arguably one of the worst events to happen in Poe's life took place. His wife, Virginia Clem Poe, dies from tuberculosis. This event would end up devastating Poe horribly. Oftentimes, he would find himself at her grave crying himself to sleep.
In 1848, Poe reads the Poetic Principle to an audience of 1,800 and writes The Bells. In 1849, Poe travels to Richmond to lecture and see friends during the midsummer. He gets re-engaged to Sarah Royster, the same person that broke his heart from when he returned from the University of Virginia. On September 27, 1849, Poe leaves Richmond to return home. On his way, he makes a stop at Baltimore, Maryland on October 3, 1849. There are many theories that explain what happened during his time in Baltimore. No one really knows what happened for sure, but what we do know was that Poe was found in the streets of Baltimore delirious and in need of immediate help. Poe was found and taken to the Washington College Hospital. He stayed at the hospital until he died on Sunday, October 7, 1849. His parting words were, "God help my poor soul." Many people think that Poe was put in this situation because he went to a bar and got severely drunk, causing him to stagger onto the streets to where he was found. Another theory was that he was drugged and kidnapped for voting purposes, but no one knows for sure. For all we know, he may have fell and didn't have his life alert.